Imagine the rhythmic metallic sound of thousands of swords being sharpened against raw stone. The air is heavy, thick with the smell of roasting meat from campfires and the pungent aroma of wine drifting through the heat of a summer night. Outside the walls of Jerusalem, the scene was a living nightmare. The largest army the ancient world had ever known lay encamped, stretching for miles, covering the valley like a stain of iron and blood. These were 185,000 Assyrian soldiers. Men hardened by decades of brutal conquest. War machines trained to crush entire nations and erase names from history without a shred of mercy. The Assyrians were not just soldiers. They were masters of psychological terror, notorious for impaling their enemies and displaying their victories with a cruelty that made the world tremble. King Sennacherib, seated upon his golden throne in the heart of the camp, already felt like the absolute master of existence. From the heights of his pride, he gazed at the walls of Jerusalem and let out roars of mocking laughter. To him, the God of Israel was just another powerless deity, like so many others he had already humiliated and whose temples he had reduced to ashes. He sent messengers to shout into the ears of the people, in their own language so all could hear, telling them that hope was an illusion and that the city's fate was sealed. He mocked them, asking, "Which of the gods of all these nations was able to deliver their land from my hands?" The dread within the walls was a physical weight, almost unbearable, where mothers clung to their children, knowing that, humanly speaking, the next day's sun would bring only the end. Before we reveal what the angel of the Lord executed in the silence of that dawn, where death itself took form, I want to extend a special invitation to you. If you feel your faith needs to be nourished by these stories of power, and if you seek to understand the deepest mysteries of the scriptures, subscribe to our channel now and turn on all notifications. Here we don't just read the Bible. We dive into its epic details so that you can feel the presence of God in every narrative. Click the subscribe button now and join our faith community that grows every single day. Inside Jerusalem, the scene was the polar opposite of the boisterous Assyrian celebration. There was a deathly silence, broken only by the sobs of those in prayer. King Hezekiah, a man of faith but also of flesh and blood, felt the crushing weight of responsibility upon his shoulders. He knew his arrows were few, his water supplies were limited, and his walls, though strong, would not withstand the siege for long. But instead of summoning his generals for a useless war council, or seeking desperate alliances with Egypt, Hezekiah did something that would change the course of human history forever. He tore his royal robes, covered himself in sackcloth as a sign of total humiliation, and entered the temple of the Lord. He did not arrive with rehearsed petitions or empty prayers. Hezekiah brought with him Sennacherib's letters of threat, physical papers overflowing with arrogance, insults, and blasphemy against the Creator. He spread them on the floor before the altar, under the flickering light of the temple lamps, and cried out with a voice from the depths of his soul, "Lord, bow down your ear and hear. Open, Lord, your eyes and see. Hear the words of Sennacherib, who has sent his servant to reproach the living God. Save us now, that all the kingdoms of the earth may know that you alone are God." All of Jerusalem was in suspense, holding its breath. The answer did not come through military reinforcements from other nations, but through the calm, cutting words of the prophet Isaiah. The message was a direct challenge to the most powerful empire in the world. The king of Assyria shall not come into this city. He shall not shoot an arrow there, nor come before it with a shield. By the way that he came, by the same shall he return. For I will defend this city to save it. Night finally fell, and the Assyrian camp plunged into a deceptive calm. The soldiers, confident in their overwhelming strength and their experience in thousands of battles, slept soundly, dreaming of the loot, the gold, and the slaves they would seize at dawn. But divine reckoning did not wait for the sun. Around midnight, something happened in the invisible dimensions that the human mind can barely process. There was no sound of heavenly trumpets, no roar of a catastrophic earthquake, nor the sound of fiery chariots galloping through the heavens. Instead, a cold, pale, and intensely powerful light descended upon the valley, as silent as the mist that covers a battlefield. The angel of the Lord manifested. Here we enter a profound mystery. Who was this being? Many scholars believe this was a Christophany, a manifestation of Christ himself before his incarnation, acting as the executor of the Father's justice. Imagine, through your mind's eye, a colossal being of light, whose presence emanated an authority so vast it would make any earthly king look like an ant. He began to walk among the Assyrian tents. There was no uncontrolled fury on his face, only the solemn fulfillment of a divine sentence already decreed. Tent by tent, row by row, The angel passed his invisible hand over the sleeping warriors. As he advanced, the breath of life was simply withdrawn, as if oxygen had been banished from those tents. Hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of hearts stopped beating simultaneously, without a single cry of pain or warning being uttered. Imagine the horror of a solitary watchman at an outpost, clutching his spear, fighting off sleep. He looks to his side and sees his fellow guard drop dead to his knees without a single wound, without a drop of blood spilled. Before he can even open his mouth to sound the alarm or comprehend what kind of plague or phenomenon was occurring, the presence of the angel reaches him, and his eyes close forever under the silver light of the moon. The army that thought itself invincible was being dismantled in absolute silence. 185,000 men, the military elite of the ancient world, became statues of cold flesh in a matter of hours. Death did not come by the edge of a sword, but by the absolute authority of the one who created life and has the power to take it back. It is fascinating to note that even ancient historians, such as Herodotus, mention a sudden catastrophe that halted the Assyrian march at that time, though they try to give natural explanations like an infestation of mice. But the Bible is clear. It was the hand of a single messenger of God. When the first pale, cold rays of the sun began to illuminate the valley, the silence that remained was terrifying. King Sennacherib, awakening in his luxurious tent lined with furs and gold, donned his royal armor and stepped out to give the final order to attack, expecting to hear the sound of trumpets and the roar of his generals. But what his eyes met was the most macabre scene in human history. Everywhere he looked, there were only lifeless bodies. The clamor of weapons and the laughter of the previous night had been replaced by the silent flight of vultures already beginning to circle. 185,000 dead soldiers. The dread that seized the emperor's heart was immediate and paralyzing. He, who called himself a god among men and who humiliated the kings of the earth, now trembled like a leaf in the wind in the middle of a giant graveyard. There were no survivors to bury the dead, no army to command, no glory to be reaped. Sennacherib fled, accompanied only by a handful of personal guards who were lucky, or perhaps unlucky, enough to survive just to witness the magnitude of the defeat. He returned to his capital, Nineveh, humiliated, his reputation of invincibility shattered before all his people. And the final tragic irony of his story happened exactly where he thought he was safe. Years later, while he was worshipping in the temple of his false god Nisroch, seeking answers for his fall, his own sons, Adramelech and Sharezer, struck him down with the sword. The man who challenged the creator ended his days betrayed and killed by his own blood, inside the house of a god who could not hear him. This epic narrative teaches us a lesson that spans millennia and reaches you, in your current moment. When your enemy or your circumstances say your defeat is inevitable, they are ignoring a crucial detail. You do not fight alone. The God who sent a single angel to deliver Jerusalem from an impossible army is the same God who hears your silent cry in your room today. He doesn't need great armies, he doesn't need much time, and he is not impressed by the arrogance of those who persecute you. He only needs a single night and the fulfillment of his word. Have you ever experienced, or do you believe, that God still operates these silent and powerful deliverances, removing obstacles that seemed like insurmountable mountains? Leave your comment right now with the word, deliverance. If you believe the Lord is fighting your battles, even in those early hours when you feel most alone and unprotected, your participation is vital so that this message reaches more lives in need of hope. Thank you so much for following this epic account to the end. May the peace that surpasses all understanding guard your heart, and may the God of Hezekiah protect your home and confound all who rise against your purpose. We'll see you in the next video, where we will continue our journey through the deepest mysteries and wonders of the Holy Scriptures. Until then.